Peace for the Troubled Heart by Herman Hoeksema. For they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth, and the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil. Judges chapter 2 verses 13 to 15. Angry with his people. Chapter 13, part 1. In the crucible of God's anger, God's people are purified. With the wicked, it is not so, for he is angry with the wicked every day, and they flee from his burning wrath, always descending on the steeply declining way of hastening to destruction, until they sink into the pools that burns with fire and sulphur, where their smoke goes up forever and ever. But against his people, God's anger burns, until they are cleansed from their iniquity. As they often foolishly would pursue the way of sin, turning their faces away from him, the living God, towards hell and destruction, he hems them in from every side. His hand turns against them for evil, whithersoever they go, leaving only to them the narrow way of righteousness and life, so that toward it they might turn to life and liberty. Often God tries the righteous as silver is tried by fire. His hot anger against them is the anger of love, of holy love, sanctifying. The anger of the Lord was hot. It always is hot against all sin and iniquity, for he is unchangeably holy, loving himself with a holy self-love as the sole good and overflowing fount of all good, constantly, eternally, willing too that they shall love him and acknowledge that he is good. In that unchangeably holy self-love, the anger of the Most High is as constant as his holiness. It always burns. It always is hot against the workers of iniquity. It constantly consumes all that is corrupt and blazes against those who refuse to glorify him. The anger of the Lord is not a sudden ebullition of ill temper that vanishes as quickly as it bursts forth, but is a constantly burning fire, kindled from within the unfathomable depths of his eternally adoring being. It burns against all iniquity. And when the people of God stand in the place of unrighteousness and walk in the way of perverseness, the anger of the Lord burns against them. Thus it was with the people of Israel of old. They forsook the Lord and followed after Baal and Ashtaroth. God's covenantal people they were. Jehovah had given them his revelation and his law, and they knew him. They were to be holy unto the Lord, separated from the nations. And he blessed them with the blessings of his covenant in the land in which he had planted them. Him, their God, they forsook. They deliberately dismissed him from their minds and from their hearts and from their lives. They refused to keep his precepts as they were delivered unto him by his servant Moses. They forsook his service, forsook his sanctuary, forsook the blood of atonement, and they served Baalim and Ashtaroth. Baal is Bel, that is, Lord, the sun god he was supposed to be, and as such the Lord of heaven and the source of all blessing. Not only in Babylonia was he worshipped, but also by the Canaanites and the surrounding nations. Many Baalim were there. Each locality had its own Baal. When times were normal, he received from his worshippers incense and burnt offerings, and when his wrath was thought to be manifested in times of calamity and distress, his servants would appease him by human sacrifices, especially by the sacrifice of children. Ashtaroth represented the female counterpart of the masculine Baal. Like Baalim, there were many Ashtaroth, and their worship usually was connected with immoral rites. These gods Israel served. For them they forsook Jehovah. Not indeed because of his misunderstanding. Knowledge is no virtue, and sin is no intellectual mistake. But these gods were carnal gods, and their worship was a carnal worship. Serving him, the people could follow after the lust of the flesh. Always the lust of the flesh prefers the idols of our imagination to the service of the living God. Thus Israel forsook their Holy One to follow after the abominations of the heathen. Thus always the church forsakes the living God in order to put her trust in the vanities of men, that indeed impotent to save, but allow full sway to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Yet, how is it possible? How can God's people forsake him? Are they not his workmanship, the fruit of his grace? Is there, then, a falling away of the saints? God forbid. He never forsakes the work of his hands. First, not all the seed of Abraham is spiritual seed, not all the children of the promise. The carnal element is always present, is often strong, and is always striving for predominance, both in the old and in the new dispensations. It is not all Israel that is of Israel, and wistfully their carnal element constantly has its eyes directed to Balaam and Ashtaroth, to the world and its lust. It cannot rest until it sees the church prostrate before the vanities of the heathen. Its doctrine is always false. Its ways is always corrupt. Its intentions are always wicked. Secondly, the spiritual seed is far from perfect. Easily they are lulled to sleep. They fail to watch and pray. They cease from fighting the battle. They do not remove the evil men from their midst. And before they know it, the carnal element predominates, and its representatives in the sanctuary, among the prophets, in the pulpit, and in high places. They who should be routed out from among the people of God become leaders among them, and they lead the people of God astray. Gradually and subtly, very wickedly, these leaders teach the people to forsake the living God, and they lead the people to the shrines of Balaam and Ashtaroth, where God's anger burns hotly against his people.